Monica finally names Tyler Perry, Oprah, and Diddy in courtroom testimony. In a courtroom already gripped by scandal and speculation, a seismic shift occurred on the 6th day of the ongoing federal trial against Sean Diddy Combs. Without prior notice or inclusion on the official witness list, Academy Award-winning actress and longtime Hollywood outsider Monique took the stand under oath armed with dates, transcripts, and a decade's worth of silence-turned testimony. The move stunned both prosecution and defense alike. Her name had not surfaced in any pretrial documents. Her testimony had not been anticipated. And yet by midday, it became clear Monique was not merely a witness. She was the prosecution's unexpected trump card and perhaps the voice that would shift the tide of the entire proceeding. Courtroom observers noted a distinct tension as she entered. Diddy, seated in a charcoal suit, reportedly leaned toward his attorney, whispering with visible discomfort. Reporters immediately filed dispatches. Prosecutors shuffled papers with a renewed urgency. Within moments, Monique began laying out a narrative of systemic suppression, one rooted in personal retaliation, backroom deals, and industry-wide complicity. "I was asked here to speak the truth," she declared, "and that's what I intend to do." What followed was not simply testimony. It was a systematic dismantling of the reputational firewall surrounding some of the entertainment industry's most powerful names. She began by recounting a 2018 phone call with filmmaker Tyler Perry. According to Monique, Perry admitted that her blackballing from the film industry had been unjust. He allegedly promised a public apology, a promise that, as of today, remains unfulfilled. When pressed on his hesitation, she said, Perry confessed it wasn't about her. It was about who might get exposed in the fallout. He told me, and I quote, "If I go public, it blows back on Puff." Monique testified, referring to Diddy by his well-known moniker. Gasps were audible. Members of the jury reportedly leaned forward. From there, the revelations escalated. Monique described a 2006 invitation to one of Diddy's private gatherings in the Hollywood Hills. She recalled candlelit rooms, confiscated phones, and an atmosphere far removed from the networking opportunity it was billed as. She detailed a moment where she overheard someone referencing NDAs and experience as she was urged to sign a document. She refused, she left. The consequence, she said, was professional exile. "I got cut out," she told the court. "My phone stopped ringing. I was labeled difficult. But I never forgot what I saw." The prosecution followed quickly, asking if what she experienced matched the patterns described by prior witnesses. Monique nodded. She described it as a system, one designed to test compliance and punish dissent. And then came what many in the courtroom would later call the day's pivotal moment. She spoke of a now infamous moment caught on social media. Tyler Perry publicly donating $1 million to Bishop T.D. Jakes' church. At the time, it was praised as generosity. Today, Monique reframed it as calculated. That wasn't a donation. That was a payoff, she said. A transaction meant to secure silence. She linked the timing to the sudden disappearance of damaging gossip blog posts and rumors, many of which referenced Diddy by name. Prosecutors then submitted a photograph dated just weeks after the church event showing Perry and Diddy together at a BET Function Arms, slung around each other in apparent solidarity. It painted a portrait one far removed from coincidence. From her purse, Monique produced what she called the call a transcript of her private conversation with Perry. She handed it to the bailiff. The judge reviewed the opening lines and nodded to proceed. The courtroom sat in near total stillness as she read. "You were never difficult. You just didn't want to work for free," Perry allegedly stated. But then, the pivot to "I can't go public. Puff's name is wrapped up in too much right now." The courtroom reaction was instant and visceral. Monique's voice never wavered. "You think this trial is just about Diddy?" she asked, turning to the jury. "It's about everyone who stood beside him and chose silence over truth." As the judge ruled the transcript admissible, Diddy's attorneys reportedly exchanged sharp words behind their notepads. The prosecution, visibly emboldened, pivoted into a broader examination of what Monique called the silence machine, a coordinated culture of complicity, sustained by NDAs, private settlements, and reputational warfare. What had begun as a case against one man was in a matter of hours evolving into a systemic indictment of the very structures that allowed him to thrive. And at the center of it stood Monique, no longer the dismissed actress fighting to clear her name, but a sworn witness wielding evidence defiance, and a platform built not by Hollywood, but in spite of it. What began as an explosive re-entry into the public eye for Monique quickly escalated into a full frontal assault on an entire system. By the time she resumed her place on the stand after a short recess, it was no longer simply Sean Diddy Combs on trial, it was the structure around him. The system of handlers, media fixers, high-profile allies, and institutions that had for years ensured that his secrets remained just that, secrets. And Monique came with names, timelines, and receipts. There is a list in Hollywood she began her tone even. It's not written down, but everybody knows it exists. A list of people you don't speak against, the untouchables. The courtroom held its collective breath. Puff was on that list. Tyler was on that list. And Oprah, she practically created it. With that, what had once felt like a personal vendetta transformed into a systemic indictment. Monique's story became a case study in the architecture of silence, how reputations are protected, how dissenters are neutralized, and how the illusion of power is weaponized against truth-tellers. She referenced a redacted email she'd received by accident, one sent by a public relations executive who represented both Diddy and Tyler Perry. The subject line, managing the Monique narrative. Her name, Puff's name, Tyler's name, all in one thread. They all have the same people cleaning up their messes, she told the court. And I know because I saw the chain. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. The judge reviewed the printed email and accepted a redacted version into evidence. It marked the first time in the trial that a digital link directly connecting multiple high-profile defendants had been submitted. The courtroom reacted with hushed murmurs. Monique wasn't finished. In a brief but haunting passage of her testimony, she read a statement from an unnamed actor, redacted for safety, who claimed to have attended a retreat hosted by a powerful male filmmaker. Phones were confiscated, contracts were signed, and what occurred inside the actor wrote was not art, it was compliance. Monique refused to name the host. She didn't need to. Some of them saw things she said quietly, things they were never supposed to see. For the prosecution, the strategy was becoming clear. This wasn't just about Diddy's actions, it was about how a network of cultural power players insulated those actions, traded favors, and manipulated media narratives to maintain the illusion of innocence. They returned to Monique's alleged blackballing in the aftermath of Precious, the Oscar-winning film that should have solidified her career, not stifled it. She recalled a phone call from a junior executive at Revolt TV, Diddy's media company. The message, she said, was simple but devastating. You rubbed the wrong people. Puff don't like noise. That phrase, don't like noise, surfaced again when the prosecution submitted internal emails from a PR firm jointly employed by both Tyler Perry Studios and Revolt. The emails discussed Monique and Cassie Ventura in the same sentence. The focused narrative management. It was the first time the court had tangible proof that reputational warfare had been strategized across multiple entities. Monique's gaze never left the jury. They used that word difficult like a virus, she said. Infect one casting director with it, it spreads to everyone. Soon, your name comes up in a room, and they already have a reason to say no. Then she delivered a line that would echo through newsrooms and social media. For days, I wasn't blackballed. I was whiteballed by black people, people who looked like me, people more scared to lose their spot than to stand up for the truth. There was no objection, just silence. And in that silence, a courtroom and a culture sat with the weight of what was being said. She detailed the last 13 years of her life, how the phone calls dried up, how producers labeled her ungrateful, how she was repeatedly told to be thankful for any opportunity she was given, how she was warned, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, to stay quiet. "I didn't want to be here," she said, "but I needed to be. Because what they did to me, what they did to Cassie, what they're doing to young women and men right now, it won't stop unless someone speaks louder than the machine." The prosecution gave her the floor, and for the next 15 minutes, Monique told the court about what she called her breaking point. Not a single moment, but a sequence, the release of the prints recording Diddy's outburst. In court, Cassie Ventura's breakdown on the stand. "I saw all of it," she said, "and I heard my grandmother's voice. 'Baby, don't let them write your story without you in the room.' That's when she said yes to testifying. What followed were her final revelations of the day. That Tyler Perry had, in her words, made calls to make sure no one else would work with me. That he had the power to help, and instead he helped Barry." She held up a folder, one the court had not yet seen. "I have the call log," she said. "I know who was at the parties. I know who signed NDAs. I saw people sign them in front of me." The defense immediately objected, but the moment had landed. The jury had heard it. The court had felt it. Monique's transformation was now undeniable. From silenced outsider to central witness. From blackballed actress to systemic whistleblower. This was no longer just about one man. It was about the silence machine and the first person bold enough to shut it down. As court reconvened on day 7, the gallery packed tighter than ever. Reporters arrived before dawn. Protesters gathered outside with signs quoting yesterday's most viral soundbite, "I wasn't blackballed. I was whiteballed by black people." And by 9:01 a.m., it became clear that Monique wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She returned to the stand without notes. This time, she didn't need transcripts or folders. She had a name, and she had a list. "There is a list in Hollywood," she said again, this time slower. "It's not on paper, but it's real, and everybody knows it." She paused, scanning the courtroom. If you speak against certain people, if you ask too many questions, challenge too loudly, you're gone. Not fired, not arrested, just gone. And nobody asked why. The jury sat motionless. So did Diddy. So did the judge. Puff was on that list. Tyler was on that list. And Oprah. She practically created it. This wasn't metaphor. This was structure. And Monique broke it down piece by piece. She listed actors, directors, producers, some household names, some nearly forgotten who she claimed had once been rising stars, only to disappear after violating the invisible code. Ever notice how many people got one hit, show one major role, and then nothing? It's not always failure. Sometimes it's refusal. Sometimes it's knowing too much. The prosecution then presented a sealed statement from a former actor anonymous and redacted for protection. The content was chilling. In the statement, the actor described attending a private retreat hosted by a powerful male filmmaker. Phones were taken. NDAs were signed. The atmosphere, according to the actor, was ritualistic. There were cameras. There were rules. And there were consequences. The host was not named. Monique didn't offer one. She didn't have to. "You don't need a name," she said quietly. "The structure is the point. It doesn't matter who was at the top. What matters is who kept it quiet." The prosecution built on her momentum, revealing internal memos that discussed containment protocols for multiple reputational threats involving Puff and his known associates. These protocols included digital scrubbing, narrative redirection, and influencer briefings, strategic leaks to steer attention elsewhere. The defense objected repeatedly. The judge allowed most of it in. Then came Oprah. Monique addressed her inclusion not as a grudge, but as a warning. "In 2010, I told Oprah something personal," she said. "I told her I'd been abused by my brother. She promised not to exploit it." The court grew tense. She invited him on her show. without telling me. Right after I declined to do the Precious press tour. Gasps. She said it was business. But I knew. I was being punished. Quietly. Publicly. For the first time, Monique's voice caught. But she didn't stop. That wasn't a segment. That was leverage. That was a warning shot to every other actor watching play the game, or we'll play you. The prosecution moved fast. They pulled up a timeline of events. The Precious fallout, the talk show, segment, the blackballing. Then just weeks later, emails from Oprah's camp to PR firms, tied to both Perry and Combs. Subject narrative protection. It was circumstantial, but not without weight. Monique closed her testimony for the day with one final reference to something she called the silence economy. Careers are currency, she said, and silence is expensive. Sometimes you're paid to keep it. Sometimes you pay when you don't. She stepped down to a room that didn't dare exhale. By the time the lunch recess began, Twitter had already coined a new term, the Monique Doctrine, a cultural indictment against power silence and the invisible cost of truth. What had started as a celebrity trial had officially become something else entirely. And at the center of it was a woman who'd once been erased, now writing the story in real time. By the fourth hour of testimony, it became evident that Monique was no longer just a surprise witness, she had become the spine of the case. Her words weren't just painting Diddy as an abuser of power, they were unraveling the scaffolding that had protected him. And now the courtroom was finally asking what it had long feared, to confront how much truth could the industry afford before it collapsed in on itself. As she resumed the stand, the prosecution shifted their line of questioning from anecdotal recollection to systemic analysis. The goal was clear: prove that Monique's downfall wasn't a result of artistic decline or contractual dispute, but a calculated erasure rooted in fear and control. What, in your opinion, was the root cause of this system of silence? The prosecutor asked. Monique didn't hesitate. Fear, she said. Everyone in this industry is scared. Scared to lose their job. Scared to lose relevance. Scared to lose access to the table they fought so hard to reach. And people like Puff, like Tyler, and yes, like Oprah, they made it very expensive to tell the truth. She looked toward Diddy. You thought nobody would talk, she said quietly. You built an empire strong enough to silence everybody. But now you're sitting in silence. And I hope you finally hear us. The courtroom, according to multiple reporters, was still. As if the room itself had drawn a breath it couldn't yet exhale. What followed was perhaps the most damning detail yet. Monique revealed that after her career began to stall, she received a call from a junior executive at Revolt TV, Diddy's own platform. The voice on the other end was familiar, someone she'd once worked with during press events. The message: you rubbed the wrong people. It's not just about Tyler and Oprah. Puff don't like noise either. Monique paused. That's when I realized I wasn't collateral damage. I was the deal breaker. Prosecutors pounced. They introduced a chain of emails between PR consultants working with both Tyler Perry Studios and Revolt, outlining a coordinated push to restructure narratives involving Monique and Cassie Ventura, the latter being another key witness who had accused Diddy of abuse. The connection was explicit. Both women had broken rank. Both women had spoken up. And both, it seemed, had been targeted for reputational damage in near identical timelines. For the jury, this wasn't coincidence, it was coordination. Monique continued recounting how casting directors began treating her differently. Scripts stopped coming. Meetings were canceled last minute. One assistant director allegedly told her agent, "We can't have her name on a call sheet, too much drama." They used that word difficult as a weapon, she said. And they passed it around like a disease. The phrase landed. Like a disease. A label that infected rooms she never even walked into. That preceded her voice, that emptied her calendar, that filled her silence. The prosecution then presented internal memos showing targeted keyword suppression on entertainment platforms, removing Monique's name from searches related to awards, season buzz studio recommendations, and industry retrospectives. Her image, once lit up in lights, had been digitally dimmed. This wasn't passive neglect, the prosecutor told the court. This was active erasure. Monique nodded. And it was effective, she added. For a long time it worked. Her voice grew quieter, more reflective. They told me to be grateful, that I should be happy to even be on set, that black women in this business didn't have the luxury of principle. Then she looked directly at the gallery. Let me be clear. I didn't lose my career. I was stripped of it. And the people who did it looked like me. Gasps were audible once again. The courtroom had heard many truths over the course of the trial, but few had cut as deeply as that. The judge, maintaining composure, called a 10-minute recess. The gallery buzzed as spectators, journalists, and legal observers tried to make sense of what had just unfolded. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere had changed. What had started as a tabloid spectacle was now a cultural moment, a moral inventory. And as one civil rights attorney on site later told the press, this isn't just about Diddy anymore. This is about how power uses culture to camouflage itself. When the courtroom reconvened, Monique offered one final reflection for the day. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shouted. It was measured and devastating. I didn't come here to ruin anyone's life. I came because I refused to let them ruin mine in silence. And with that, she stepped down for the day. The prosecution rested their case, temporarily reorganizing their next witnesses in light of the cultural shockwave that Monique had just detonated. And the defense. They were left in stunned silence, forced to grapple with a witness whose credibility had been years in the making, and whose story had now become the trial's emotional and moral centerpiece. As proceedings entered their final stretch, there was no longer any question the trial had shifted. What began as a narrow legal focus on Sean Diddy Combs had expanded into something far more volatile, a full-blown cultural inquest. Institutions trembled, narratives cracked, and the industry that had once rendered Monique invisible now found itself answering for the silence it had orchestrated. And then, without warning, came the moment no one expected. The defense, up until now aggressive in tone and posture, declined to cross-examine Monique further. No rebuttal, no challenge. Their legal team cited strategic reserve. But inside the courtroom, the meaning was clear. They feared she had more. Her testimony had proven not just credible, but bulletproof. The prosecution seized the momentum. They called to the stand a digital forensics expert who authenticated call logs submitted by Monique in Part 4 records, showing direct communication between Tyler Perry's team and executives at Revolt TV in the months immediately following her Precious Press tour refusal. Several of the calls took place just days before Monique's major deals were abruptly canceled, and then came the nail, an audio file, previously unaired, reviewed under seal. In the recording, a voice consistent with Perry's is heard saying, "I know she's not difficult, but we can't move with her unless she apologizes publicly. If not, we let it ride out. People forget. She'll be fine." The judge allowed only a transcript to be read, allowed, not played. Still, the damage was done. In the gallery, several onlookers gasped audibly. This wasn't about a single man's abuse anymore. It was about the quiet strategies used to suppress dissent under the banner of PR. The final witness called by the prosecution was a former assistant at a major entertainment PR firm. They testified under the protection of whistleblower status. Their claim: we were told to monitor narratives, flag keywords, bury certain names under SEO deadweight. Monique was high on that list. The courtroom reaction was instantaneous. Even the judge appeared rattled. With the last testimony log, closing statements began the next morning. The prosecution stood firm. This case began with abuse, the lead attorney said. But what we've uncovered is far more chilling. A cultural ecosystem of silence coordinated by people with power, people with reach, and people who knew exactly what they were doing. They reminded the jury of Cassie Ventura's breakdown on the stand, of the audio files, of the photos, of the parties, of the rituals, and now of the witness who broke the dam. Monique's career was not ruined by one man's ego. It was dismantled by a system built to destroy anyone who said no. The defense, in contrast, kept their argument narrow. They painted Monique as emotional, driven by old resentment, and eager for relevance. But the courtroom, like the culture outside its walls, had already shifted. The public, once skeptical, now watched with a different lens. And then, just before the jury began deliberations, something unprecedented happened. Monique was granted a rare final moment, not as a witness, but as a citizen. "I don't want revenge," she told the room. "I want restoration. For every artist labeled difficult, for every woman told to be grateful, for every career lost because someone powerful didn't want to be questioned." Her voice was calm, her words measured. You don't need a camera or a stage to make history. You just need to tell the truth when it's the hardest thing to say. Then she turned to Diddy, who remained seated, expression unreadable. "You built an empire," she said, "but you forgot one thing. Empires fall." 3 days later, the jury returned, a partial verdict opening the door to further indictments, perjury investigations, and new subpoenas. But by then, the trial was already something bigger. It was a reckoning. Monique, once erased, now stood at the center of a movement. A survivor, not just of abuse, but of narrative. And for the first time in over a decade, she wasn't fighting to be heard. She was the voice that broke the silence.